Okay. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Your Honour.
You may proceed to cross-examine the witness if you so wish.
Thank you, Your Honour. Mr. McCloskey indicated that we may not have any questions, but we do have a few. So.
Yes, sir, that's why I have asked you. So please go ahead. And take your time.
Good afternoon, Mr. Miletić.
Dobar dan.
Good afternoon.
I'd just like to clarify with you first your testimony today. In June 2008, you testified here that you picked up or you obtained the guest logbooks for July 1995. That's what you testified in June, correct?
Ja sam dobio kopije.
I received copies of the documents that I mentioned.
You received copies of the guest logbooks for July 1995. Is that what you're saying?
Naprotiv, ja knjigu vodstvu nisam nikad.
No, I did not mention the guest logbooks. I did not say that I received them. I received invoices and the parts that have to do with the approvals or authorizations that I mentioned.
I just want to clarify, sir, in June 2008, you said you did receive copies of the guest logbooks, and today you've told us that that was a mistake and that you didn't receive those copies, correct?
Ja se izvinjavam.
I do apologize for having done that at that time. I did not do it on purpose. I did not intend to mislead anyone or to prejudice anyone in any way. The sense and the intention was to say things as they were, but it was not precise enough. And if anyone had asked me at that time to be more precise, I would have given the same answer as I did today.
So I want to read out a question that was asked to you at transcript page 21945. Now, you've just said that if someone had asked you to be more precise, you would have given the same answer. Well, this was the question that you were asked. Can you describe to me everything you know, everything you remember about those documents? You've obviously seen them. Precisely describe to me what they were as far as you can recall. Do you remember that question?
Sjećam.
I do.
And do you remember that that question drew an objection from defence counsel?
Ne sjećam se toliko.
I don't recall everything. I don't remember how it proceeded from there. I wish I could.
Okay, well, you made a mistake in your your June 2008 testimony, and you made that mistake more than once, didn't you, sir?
Radi se o istoj stvari.
It's one and the same thing. in one case when we were talking about the fact that instead of receiving the documents that we had sought, that would have given us the data immediately, we found and took the invoices. And in the other case, the sentence was the same, that we took the invoices instead of, now I don't want to list all the documents, the guest book, the journals, and so on. I think that it's the same.
And so when did you first communicate to Mr. Jovanovic that you had made this mistake?
Pa ja nisam prenosio.
Well, I did not communicate that to Mr. Jovanovic. I thought, well, I didn't have that in front of me, but to my mind, it was sufficient. But then later on, I don't know how the procedure was, but at any rate, up to the day when they told me that I needed to provide some clarifications, and that was some time after that.
Today is the first time that you have spoken with the defence about this issue.
Mi smo
One moment before you answer the question. Yes, Mr. Jovanovic.
The witness answered differently. He indicated that it was a time when he communicated with me.
It was my mistake.
Okay.
I'll clarify
Okay.
that.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly when did you discuss this issue with the defence? Can you tell us how many times, over what period of time?
Mislim da je to bilo
I think it was several weeks later. I don't know the exact date. I don't know the exact date when I was told that I should provide some more precise answers to some of the questions.
I od tada
And since that time, we've had several contacts to discuss the procedure and how to explain that with greater precision, because the first time we didn't do this in depth. Not only in this case, but in other cases, and we didn't get the broader context, and we did not go and get specific answers, what was done, who specifically was involved by name, and so on.
So what happened when you first spoke about this? Did Mr. Jovanovic tell you that there may have been an issue with the translation, or did he ask you for further clarification and you suggested that there was an issue, or can you tell us how that conversation went?
pa jednostavno
Well, translation was not brought up at all, because I have nothing to do with it in terms of how my testimony was given technically. But the thrust of the conversation was to clarify some definitions and some kinds. This was the most important part of documents that we were supposed to find, and what we actually managed to find, what we couldn't find physically, and what was not accessible to us, because after all, what was important to us was to get results regardless of the actual source.
So you told us today that in the documents that you received from Mr. Ilic, you saw references to Vujonin Popović. Is that correct?
Pa normalno da sam to očekivao.
Well, naturally, that's what I expected, that's what I sought, that's what I obtained. And this was a sign that indicated to me that what I was asking for, was what I was waiting for, that I actually got it.
Okay, I'd like to take you back to your testimony in June this year and read you a question and answer that was put to you on this same topic. Now, in cross-examination, you were asked, the documents you got from the Hotel Fontana, did they indicate that Vujanin Popović had spent the night there in July anytime 1995? And this was your answer. The documents existed. I didn't go into the contents of the documents. The most important thing was that the documents dated from the month of July 1995 and that they related to that particular lodging. I didn't have any need to go into the contents of the documents to be able to answer your question. Now, sir, which of your testimony under oath is correct? The one from June or the one from today?
Mislim I tada I sad.
I think that the sense remains the same both times. Now, if you want to define what it means that I didn't go into the contents, I think that there was the first name and the last name in some of the documents, on some of the invoices, several invoices, indicating that Vujanin Popović spent the night in the hotel 2 times. What does it mean that I wasn't going into the substance and now I'm saying that I just browsed through the invoices? I meant the same thing, that this information exists there, it is recorded, that this man did spend the night in the hotel, so there's a record of it. I think the essence is the same.
So you were asked a specific question in June. Did those documents indicate that Vujanin Popović had spent the night there in July 1995? And your response was that you didn't have any need to go into the contents. Today, you've told us that you did see his name on those documents. That's a different answer, isn't it?
Mr. Zvanovic.
My friend missed one sentence from previously cited passage that he said the document existed.
Not sure I'm following you, Mr. Zvanovic.
It's page 46, line 14. The document existed.
Your Honour,
It was
on
his
the previous page, on 14, I read, that's been read into the record.
46, line 14.
Yeah.
The document existed.
That's what I read into the record.
Yes.
Yeah, good.
And so, did any of the material you saw contain the name Bayara?
In the
One moment before you proceed with this question, because we want to see it clear in this. Yeah. Yeah, he hasn't answered that. He hasn't answered that previous question. So let's go through that first, and then you proceed with this Beara.
Yes, Your Honour. My question was, so you were asked in your testimony in June whether the documents you saw indicated that Vujanin Popović had spent the night there in July 1995. The version you gave today was very different from the version you gave then. Now, which of your testimony is correct?
Ja sam težio
Well, I wanted to give the same answer both then and now. I claim that Vujadin Popović was listed in the document. His name was there. The date when he stayed there and other information that was listed there, the sum of money and so on. So I saw that the moment I received the documents, and I think that today I gave the same answer, to the effect that I saw that Popović was listed as a guest in the hotel on those dates. So that was not only one night, but several or more than one.
So did any of the material you saw contain the name Bayara?
To mi je novo pitanje.
Well, that's a new question for me. In the documents that I received from Ilić, I did not find Beara's name. If I had, I would have returned the documents to him. What would I do with a document that nobody needs and that I myself don't need? So I really have to say no. Why would I be looking for other names, other persons, and so on?
So the Brutnuts Brigade authorisations that you failed to mention in June, you didn't see Mr. Bayara's name on one of them?
Mislim da se konkretno
Well, to be quite specific, the authorizations or approvals from the Bratunac Brigade, I didn't see Mr. Beara's name at all there.
Did you look at these authorisations?
po nekoliko puta.
Well, several times.
Znam ih sad na pamet.
I know them by heart. Of course, when I receive something, then I go through all the pages, I look at the format, I check whether there are any duplicates or forgeries. I look for anything that may have been planted there, anything that is out of the ordinary in terms of bookkeeping.
I can just have one moment, Your Honour. So I only have one more question for you. What happened to the documents that Mr. Jovanovic lost in 2006? Have those documents ever been found?
Ja sam njemu donio.
Well, I handed over to him another set of documents, the same documents, I have to say. Now, as to what happened with the previous set, I did not discuss this with him. I didn't even ask him.
The missing documents, where were they last seen?
Predajom dokumenta.
When I handed over the documents the first time in Zvornik, I was not aware of what happened with them at all up until the time when I was told that I should go back to the hotel and obtain them once again. So as for their fate, I didn't inquire about that and I was not interested in it.
Thank you, Your Honour. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Judge Prost would like to put some questions to you, Mr. Miletić.
Mr. Miletić, I'm going to begin with something you just answered to Mr. Mitchell, because I'm not clear at all now on what kind of a review you made of these documents. Now, Mr. Mitchell noted your testimony before us previously, and this is at page 21944, where you said that, in answer to the question about Mr. Popović, you said, I didn't go into the content of the documents. The important thing was that the documents dated from the month of July and they related to that particular lodging. I didn't have any need to go into the contents of the documents. Now today, earlier on, you said something very similar. You said that when you received, and this was at page 31, lines 1 to 15, when you received these documents the first time, you said, I just browsed through the documents superficially. I didn't count them. You've indicated you didn't list them. And yet, just now, at page 49, you say, in terms of the authorizations which were in those documents, I know them by heart. When I receive something, I go through all the pages. I look at the format. I check whether they're duplicates or forgeries. I look for anything that may have been planted there, anything out of ordinary in terms of bookkeeping. So tell me, what is the situation? Did you review these documents in detail, or did you not?
Jedno je trenutak
Well, the moment when I received the documents is one thing, and the other thing is the period when I was in possession of those documents up until the time when I handed them over to Mr. Živanović. Given the circumstances at the time when Ilić handed those documents to me, Ilić simply went out into the street, and I could not do all those things that you just mentioned here. But throughout the period while I was in possession of those documents, while I had them in my custody, up until the time when I handed them over to Defense Counsel, I had an opportunity to go through them in detail. I did that for my own sake, so I don't know if you understand me or not. So I did not have them in my possession for just a day or two, and they were not just kept somewhere. I had to familiarize myself with them and to be able to convey properly the quality of the work, whether everything that was requested was indeed present, all the things that were present, the quantity, the contents, I had to specify all that.
Well, that's quite different then from what you told us in June, because there was no specification on that question as to time period. You were asked about the content of the documents, and you seemed to indicate previously that you had not looked at the content. But now you're telling us you did do a very thorough review of the content of these documents. Is that the case?
Meni tada nije bilo.
I wasn't asked the question at the time. I wasn't asked to provide this extent of explanation as I'm being asked now. They only asked whether I inspected those documents, and then we moved on. There was no time for me to explain. I do have the time now to talk about document numbers, are these invoices, are these authorizations, and so on and so forth, discussing the type of document. But back then, it was just one thing of many that were discussed. I was asked to say specifically what I did in that building during those days, what I sought and what I received. That was the only purpose.
And when you did this examination then, did you make a list, as might be normal for an investigator, list out what the documents were, what the dates were, what the contents were? Did you make a list of that nature to give over to Defense Counsel?
U svim takvim situacijama
Whenever there were situations like that, and there were quite a number of them, I never put together an attachment like that, specifying these things. I never attached any document to the documents that I had singled out. I would get the documents, I would put them in an envelope. In this case, even that was not the case. There was no envelope involved. And then I would deliver them like that to the council, with no signatures, no receipts, or anything else.
Now I'm going to be very specific here, since we've had some confusion on the point. We're not talking about whether you made a list right at the time that you received the documents, but when you did this thorough review that you just told us about, did you, during the course of that review, make any kind of a list of the documents that you were looking at?
Hvala, nisam.
No, I didn't.
And did you take any notes about the contents of those documents? Did you keep any notes whatsoever?
Nisam.
No.
And afterwards, at any point in time, and I don't want to be limited in any time frame here, did you at any point in time make a list of those documents or make notes about the contents of those documents, anything of that nature, at any time?
Ni tada, ni...
No, not then, not ever.
Based on that, you testified here today. So in summary, you had no list, and you obviously didn't keep any copies of these documents. Is that correct?
To je tačno.
That's correct. Are you suggesting that or are you asking me whether I made copies of the documents?
Made any copies?
Mislim, zašto?
Why would I have? I do apologize, but why would I have done anything like that? Perhaps to keep those, but for what purpose? I had no use for those. I would just pass them along, so that they might be used wherever necessary. I certainly didn't need to keep those at my home. I didn't copy them. I didn't make any copies or distribute copies. There is a certain procedure in place for things like these, and the procedure is well known to everyone.
Okay, then I want to try and understand your answer to this question earlier, which is Mr. Zivanovic put to you that today, and I'm going to read from his question, today in my office I showed you a selection of documents that the OTP had obtained, and I read to you part of the statement given by, I believe it was Mr. Galligan, the OTP investigator, Miss, it should be, who interviewed Mr. Baronet Miletić about inter alia, this handover of documents. I showed you these documents that Mr. Miletić mentioned. Tell me, when you compared those documents and the documents that you received, can you tell me whether these are two identical sets of documents, if there are any differences, what the differences are? And your answer was these two sets of documents are identical. I could have seen that at the first glance and every detail. How could you possibly know that, sir, when you didn't keep any notes of the documents, you kept no list of the documents? It's not that you said they were similar, but you said that they were identical. I want to try and understand how you're so certain that they were two identical sets of documents.
U toj današnjoj poređenju.
We're talking about the following situation. I had copies and I had what you termed the originals. I compare the one to the other right away. That's what I do. At the time I received the documents, I had nothing to compare them to. Not at the time.
A sada,
Now, it wouldn't be difficult to put these documents side by side, compare the headers, the numbers, the stamp, and everything else, or the author for that matter. It tallies in every respect. There is the date. You can't have the same date on two different dates or any other changes in a single invoice.
Because we may be talking at cross purposes here. So if I understand you correctly, it's not precisely what how the question was framed, but what you compared was the documents that the OTP had collected, which were shown to you by Mr. Zivanovic, with the documents that Mr. Zivanovic provided you with? Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
pa poredili smo dokumente.
We compared the documents, as far as I remember.
So these are the documents, though, not the documents necessarily, and I'm not imputing that there was any substitution, but what you compared was the documents currently held with the documents seized by the OTP. Is that correct? Currently held by Mr. Zivanovic. Is that correct?
Dokumente
They were the documents that were in our possession earlier on, and we compared those to these documents, and we realized that they were identical. There were no discrepancies. No new documents that the OTP had and we didn't, and so on and so forth. We established no discrepancies. The number and the type of the documents that we received were the same as those other ones. Well, now, had there been any discrepancy at all, I would have known, but there was none. I'm certain about that. Had this been a new document, for example, that we had and the OTP didn't, and, well, that's what I mean. We didn't notice that sort of thing at all, and that would be all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? I think that brings your testimony to an end, Mr. Miletić. Thank you for coming over again. And once more, I wish you a safe journey back home.
Hvala i vama.
Thank you too, Your Honour.
I take it there are no documents?
But I have one clarification. I have the set of documents obtained, provided by my investigator, and the set of documents by the prosecution. I had it. The only difference is in the lack of ERN numbers in my set of documents, and it is.
Yes, Mr. Mitchell or Mr. McCloskey. Usually I would prefer to have only one of you speak on this, but
I'm sorry this just got into more of a policy issue. This whole exercise has been to have the defense turn over all the documents they received so that we could compare what we have. And this witness just said we didn't have anything he didn't have, but he also said the Beara document was not in his group, and clearly the Beara document is in our group. So yes, we will gladly accept what Mr. Zivanovic is offering now, but we would like them to follow through with the court order and provide all materials that this man received. And yes, we'll gladly accept this, but we would like the full thrust of the request to receive everything. And Mr. I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell's prepared to argue any more detail if you need it. But just to clarify, yes, of course we'll accept that, but we would like an assurance that it is everything. I mean, this whole thing just...
Right, I don't think we need to hear Mr. Mitchell as well. Mr. Jovanovic, is what you are offering the entire collection of documents received, or do you have more?
Microphone, please.
Microphone.
I put all my reasons because I believe that it is not my duty to surrender my documents, the results of my investigation to the prosecution. But in this case, because the prosecution already obtained all these documents, I could provide all these documents to the prosecution.
Yeah, but you haven't answered. You haven't answered actually the basic question that I tried to put to you. And namely, rising from the point made by Mr. McCloskey, whether what you are offering is the entire collection that of documents that you were provided with by this witness, or whether you have more documents that you are not offering.
I don't have more documents. I just have these documents.
Or
he spoke about.
Okay, all right. That's the declaration that. Yes, Mr. McCloskey.
If it could include not just documents he has, but documents that the witness may still have, because that's been left out of this.
Are you aware if Mr. Miletić has more documents?
I don't believe so. I don't believe that Mr. Miletić has some other documents.
Yes, I think so.
And
okay.
They did not ask him
let's
if he has another document.
Let's close it here. Close the argument here. Yes, we would like you to tender those
Yes,
documents.
I didn't put it on any list, but I could tender it.
It's no problem. I mean, the formality of the list is not important.
I'll make the list and provide it.
Yes, you can even do it tomorrow or some other day.
Yeah.
So that you can concentrate on the rest of the proceedings. Yes, Mr. Joyce.
Well, that they're being disclosed rather than tendered into evidence, as I understand it.
Well, the purpose of the recalling of the witness in part, or for a major part, was precisely to get a clear picture as to what had been obtained by him and what he made available to Mr. Jovanovic. And basically whether there were also any substantial differences between those documents and the documents that had in the first place been provided by the prosecution. So more or less with this we will get the clear picture. So basically, unless in case I haven't made myself clear, the end of this whole procedure today and the end of the discussion basically brings us back to the main reason for which we asked this witness to be brought again. And the consequence, or the bottom line, being precisely that these documents are essential and they need to be in the record, not just being shown to the prosecution or to the bench just to have a look at them and make up our minds what was provided and whether they are exact. They need to be in the record.
Clearly, if they're going to be in the record, all parties need to see them and be in a position to make submissions upon them.
Of course.
That's helpful, Your Honour. Could I make one other observation? And the reason I've risen is we were the only other party to make some submission in response to the prosecution motion. Presumably that motion is in effect moot now because we made various legal submissions. They have not been ruled upon. We're not inviting the court to rule upon them. They involve what I would consider quite difficult and perhaps even complicated areas of law which do not need to be gone into, bearing in mind the offer that Mr. Zivanovic has just made. But I just want to be clear about that in effect this exercise has circumvented, and I make no criticism of that fact, has circumvented the need for further consideration of the prosecution motion.
I think you have put it as clear as it could be. I mean, we don't need to decide the motion in the first place, and the documents are going to be in the record. However, if you wish to have a look at them, not just you, but all the others, of course you are free to do that. And if you wish to make submissions, you only have to ask, and you will be given the opportunity.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. So take your time, Mr. Zivanovic. I don't want you to shift your concentration now on other matters. So do it at your leisure and pleasure.
Microphone, please.
Microphone.
Just a moment, I didn't understand Your Honor, I already said, due to the fact that the prosecution has all these documents, they provided it meanwhile in July or August this year. I'll provide it both to the prosecution, both to the chambers, and both to all my colleagues from defense. But basically, they are absolutely the same as the documents from the prosecution collection, just without ERN's number.
Okay, yeah, that you have already stated. Just let us have a look at them now, and then you tender them formally. And the others, please.
And these are prosecution.
Yes, yes.
With the microphone, Your Honor.
Sorry, my apologies. You will disclose these documents, the ones that have been made available to you by your investigator, and these documents, the other documents, for comparison purposes, namely the ones that were disclosed by the prosecution, in two separate bundles. You will disclose them to each and every one of your colleagues and to the prosecution.
And for trial chamber.
Yes, of course. I mean, it's taken for granted. After which, if anyone wishes to make submissions, you will have ample opportunities. That applies to any member of any defense team, as well as the prosecution. Then we will have the tendering stage, by which time you would have had enough opportunity to prepare yourself. Is it clear?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, Your Honor.
In the meantime, if you wish to see them now, Mr. Mitchell or Mr. McCloskey, of course, you only have to say so.
We would like to see them now, Your Honour.
Yes. Shall we have a short break? We'll have a short break. Any one of the defense teams that wishes to have a look at them now can also do so. We'll have a break of, next break was due at 5:45, so we can have it now.
Yeah.
We can have it now. We'll have 25 minutes now, and those of you who wish to avail themselves of this opportunity, please do so. We'll reconvene at 20 to 6.
All rise. Fique a